My name is Lisbeth Vallinga and I work as Program Manager at Wageningen University and Research, and I'm delighted to be moderating today's webinar. And this event is jointly organized by RREUSE, STAM and Wageningen University Research. And we are very pleased to have you with us today, whether you are a professional, policymaker, researcher, student, member of the ETP network, or a partner from the CISUTAC project. What we'll do today, we'll have a closer look at the current landscape of circular business models in textiles, opportunities in the sector, key barriers slowing progress. And we'll begin with Julia Barbagelata of STAM, who will guide us through the key aspects of the circular textile industry in the European Union. And following that, we'll hear from Simone Simadomo from RREUSE, who will dive into the barriers and enablers influencing textile circular business models and provide insights into the actions needed to address challenges around textile reuse, repair, and recycling. But first, before we start, some housekeeping notes. Please keep your microphones muted to avoid background noise. And we also invite you to post your thoughts and questions. You can do that in the chat, and you can post any questions you have. And we'll dedicate time for questions at the end of each presentation. And as my colleague Irene already said, the session is being recorded, and the recording will be shared afterwards with all registered participants by my colleague Irene. And with that, thank you again for joining us today. And let's get started. I'm very pleased to hand over to Julia for our opening presentation. We cannot hear you yet.
Yes, I'm not speaking yet.
Okay.
Thank you. I was sharing my screen and then I was going to start speaking. Okay. So good morning, everybody. Thank you, Lisbeth, for the great introduction. I am very grateful to you and your colleague Irene for organizing this event. As you mentioned, I'm Giulia Barbagelata. I'm a project manager at STAM, which is an engineering company in Genoa, Italy. Well, the headquarters is in Genoa. We have different offices in different parts of Italy. As part of CISUTAC project, we are the leader of the exploitation and dissemination work package. Today, I will be presenting an introduction on the EU landscape on circular textile and some of the activities that we have developed concerning circular business plan for the project pilots. Of course, we have worked in cooperation with the other activity leader for this work package. So what I am going to share is not just the work from STAM, but it's a paramount of all the work from the whole project. So what I'm going to share before ending the floor to Simone, it's going to be about the landscape of circular textile, a short focus on the project, a focus on the business plan, and then some conclusions that have been drawn. Let's keep in mind that there is still more or less a year till the end of the project, so this work is going to be further developed, and also I'm not in, I cannot share sensitive information in this session. So I will share high-level information today and try to answer to the question if there are as good as possible. So moving on to some information about the European landscape of circular textile. The European textile sector includes over 160,000 companies, most of which are SMEs, and employ more than 1.5 million people. These figures are really important in order to address the relevancy of this topic and understand why the textile sector needs to be a focus for research and development. Despite growing environmental awareness, around 8 kilos of textile per person are discarded annually, which is another reason why this is a key focus for circular economy. The sector is highly impactful generating about 8% of global CO2 emission, and between 15 and 35 tons of CO2 per ton of textile produced. Fiber production is dominated by polyester, which covers around 57.7%, and cotton, yet only 14% of PET is recycled. Given the scale and demand, advancing circularity for PET and cotton is essential, requiring improved technologies and systems for high-quality recycling and reuse. Moving on to the competitiveness and reason why this is not only a focus for our project, but for Europe in general. The sector competitiveness relies heavily on quality and innovation, as illustrated by the European strong patenting activities. As the number in my slides shows, Europe is way above both China and the US for number of patents, and more than 200 industrial designs are developed. However, also keeping in mind that most of the employed companies working on textile are small and medium enterprises, the industry faces major challenges. For example, the need for high resource use, both economic and of raw material, hazardous chemical, large volumes of waste, and the structural vulnerabilities exposed by the COVID-19, which disrupted global supply chains and altered the consumer behaviors and prompted the retailers to rethink sourcing. In response to this, the European policymakers have strengthened their focus on the sector, and the dedicated EU sustainable textile strategy and the transition pathway for textile it was developed, aiming to guide the sector toward resilience, competitiveness, and sustainability. Of course, these are just the key figures and numbers of this very wide topic. I will just give you this small introduction. Of course, there are many information on CISUTAC project website talking about this, and if need be, we can share this information with you. But this is just to be able to introduce to you the activities that were performed in order to understand how to better face these challenges. As work performed about the market analysis and then the subsequent pathway toward exploitation, a SWOT analysis was performed in cooperation with the other task leader. A SWOT analysis is nothing else than a strength, weakness, opportunities, and threat analysis applied to the circular textile sector in order to focus on the strengths that are already existing and weakness in order to be able to face threats and address opportunities. So the main strength of this field are the growing demands, the potential innovative solution, and the strong partnership that have been developed. And the weakness are a lack of awareness of this possibility, the high cost that needs to be covered in order for better develop the technologies. And as I mentioned, small medium enterprises not always have the same capacity for investment as bigger companies. And connected with this, the limited infrastructure, but the opportunities are the market growth, the support from government, and the technological advancement that are ongoing. And as per threats, there are competition challenges with China and the US, regulatory changes, which of course needs to be addressed in order to be able to focus on technical development, and economic challenges. And in parallel with this analysis, we also use another instrument, which is the PESTER analysis, which is an analysis that aims to focus on the political, economical, social, technological, environmental, and legal aspects in order to highlight broader factors that are influencing the sector, such as the EU upcoming legislation, alongside shifting fashion trends, the need for supply chain traceability, because it's also a major focus, environmental regulation and compliance with the labor laws. These findings that were performed and updated throughout the project guide the deployment of CISUTAC pilots. For each pilot was performed a dedicated and tailored SWOT analysis and pest analysis in order to be sure that we were going to build on its strengths, such as technological innovation and the alignment with the EU circularity policies. At the same time, the pilots have reduced sectoral weakness and threats, since they focus on different targets. So we are tackling the issue from different point of views, and they respond directly to the enabling and limiting factors highlighted in the test analysis that is shown, including upcoming EU legislation, demand for sustainable options, and requirements for material and labor traceability. One other aspect that is kept into consideration is that not necessarily the legislation inside Europe itself, it's aligned. So it's important that we have something at European level. Moving on to CISUTAC project focus, again, there are people better suited than me to better present also in previous session the 3 pilots of the CISUTAC project. I will just give some short information about each pilot in order to be sure that you have some information, and that when I'm going to explain the business model, the business plan, they can be related to this aspect. So the first pilot, which is repair and disassembly, it aims to deploy semi-automated repair workstation for garment and backpacks and shoes across 100 stores and 100 social enterprises sites, with a target of 2.5 million repairs annually and the creation of more than 200 new jobs. By extending product life cycle, it is expected to cut CO2 emission by 1.20 thousand tons per year. The repair market, valued at 9.15 billion in 2022, is projected to reach 13.42 billion by 2032, so in 10 years. Well, in 10 years from 2022, driven by rising sustainability and cost awareness. Each unit operating at 200 repairs per week could generate 100,000 in annual revenues against 67,000 in cost. For what concerns the target clients, which I think is in this session more relevant than specific number, include the sport brands, social enterprises, second-hand retailers, and municipal schemes. And key considerations include the operating zone training, reliable supply chain for parts, and the integration of a smart tool, which is one aspect that is also relevant for the next pilots, which is the sorting pilot. This, in particular, addresses the needs for faster and more accurate textile sorting by introducing AI-supported tools and semi-automated stations to direct items into reuse or recycling. It responds to the strong market growth in second-hand apparel and aims to significantly increase sorting volumes, reduce emission, and generate new jobs, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a key focus in general for CISUTAC project. What is anticipated for this model is lower sorting costs and substantial resale revenues, supported by both physical store and online platform, and key challenges include variable material quality, differing grading standards, and logistic-related costs. Of course, the analysis that was performed is more in-depth, but I try to summarize here the key aspects for each of these pilots. And moving on to the last pilot, which is about circular garments. This pilot focuses on scaling cost-effective recycling solutions for PET and cotton waste, aiming to divert large textile volume from incineration into new fibers and materials, which, as we were mentioning at the beginning, it's a key focus because there is so much waste that is generated by production. It targets notable CO2 and water savings while tapping into a rapidly expanding textile recycling market. The business potential is strong for this use case with the significant revenues opportunities from both the material, and the approach combines mechanical and thermoplastic recycling with new spinning methods supported by key industrial partners, and major challenges including consistent sorting quality, fragmented infrastructure, and low consumer awareness. Considering all this, the work that was done for the business plan, which began with the beginning of the project and is still in development now, is that the development of this business plan for the pilots build on the detailed assessment of the value chain dynamics, the operational feasibility and economic viability for each use case. And the approach focuses on the preparation of practical and scalable models that demonstrate how circular textile activities, such as the one from the 3 pilots, can deliver environmental benefits while remaining financially sustainable. For specifically about the 3 pilots, the business plan that are going to be pursued are for the first pilot, the centralized model is proposed using semi-automated workstation installed at retail and social enterprise locations, so a double way. And then for the second pilot, textile items are collected from urban containers and transported to centralized facilities where they are sorted into reuse, recycling, or disposal stream with the help of a decision support system, as I was mentioning earlier. And for the last use case, there is a stronger focus on the recycling aspect of PET textiles, both mechanically and with the thermoplastic, plus the hybrid yarn production from post-consumer cotton waste. My last slide is some conclusion. Of course, more conclusion will be developed in this last period of the project with the key technological developments closer to their final result. So the 3 CISUTAC pilots illustrate practical and scalable responses to many of the barriers facing the transition to a circular textile economy by addressing challenges such as the low sorting efficiencies, the limited repair infrastructure, and underdeveloped recycling models. These pilots demonstrate how technological innovation, new business model, and targeted partnership can create environmental and economic values, which are both taken into consideration in this development. However, we have to keep in consideration that structural obstacles remain, ranging from poor textile quality and complex fiber composition to insufficient consumer awareness and industry-wide resistance to change. Fast fashion continues to dominate, undermining circular effort through overconsumption and the production of low-value garments. While a growing number of consumers express interest in sustainability, this has not yet translated into widespread behavioral change. Therefore, the pilots not only serve as operational testbed, but also as catalysts for broader systemic shifts, supporting education, standardization, and policy development, which is essential to enabling long-term circularity across the textile sector. So I think that this was all for my presentation. I will give the floor back to Lisbeth. I think that we are going to do the question if there are any at the end, but other than that, thank you very much for your attention and time.
Thank you very much, Julia, for your great presentation. There's indeed now time for some questions, and I already saw some questions in the chat. The first one is from Thomas Laurent, and he asked, what is the origin of 14% of PET recycled number? As mostly mixed with cotton, separate numbers is hard to find, and most of our PET is coming from bottle. Moreover, what is the market of this 14% recycled? So that's a nice question.
From my point of view, I think that this very technical question might be better suited for our technical partners, which I don't know if they are here right now, but we can. I also see the other question, which is again from Mr. Thomas Laurent. I think it's better if some technical partners answer to that, because I work more on the business part development rather than the technical part. So I'm sorry.
Thanks a lot. Are there other questions? I'm looking.
A moment.
Yes, I see another question, which I in this case I can answer.
Yeah,
so I will read it out loud just to people who cannot read the chat. And it said, as this webinar is touching on the topic of the circular business model, I'm curious to hear where are the earnings and who. For example, the repair case with Decathlon, and how are the consumer included, that I don't see them mentioned as part of the challenges. Okay, so in this case, I had 10 to 15 minutes to present. So of course, this analysis goes into deeper details. All the aspects that I mentioned about both the pestle and the SWOT analysis also covers the behavioral aspect and the consumer aspect. So from this point of view, they are not covered, but of course the behavior is addressed not only in my work package, but in other work package. I don't know if in Simone's presentation there are going to be some aspect of this, but in any case, there are information on this on our project website. For what concern the earnings and who, again, this is another topic that I didn't go into too much because first of all, this information are not for me to share outside the project consortium, at least for now. And also this projection is going to do at the end of the project, because being this a research project, of course, we are not still ready to bring the product to market. So we have projection on how the revenues are going to behave, but we still don't have like precise number, because being a technology that is being developed, of course, the cost for now for production is higher than it's going to be in the case that this is brought to market. Okay, so then there was another thing. I'm also interested to know in which European countries this pilot are run. I don't think I have a slide for that, but everything is on the project website. Of course, for the first use case, I mentioned Decathlon, which is in Italy in this case. And then okay, there is that.
Yeah, it's not more. It's not a question, I think.
Okay, and then I saw that Jan also answered to another aspect. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? We have 3 more minutes. Otherwise, we will move to the presentation of Simone. Simone, I think you can go ahead.
All right, thank you, Lisbeth. Can you all hear me, by the way? Just so I know, my connection has been a little wobbly these days, which of course happens when you have a webinar. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Good to see you. So yeah, as Lisbeth mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, I'm Simone. I work at RREUSE. We are the largest European network of social enterprises that works in the circular economy. And within CISUTAC, we were tasked with carrying out a research effort on circular business models, which is exactly what I'm going to present today. This research effort was focused on really looking at the landscape of circular business models for textiles in the EU, and analyzing what barriers do these business models at the present moment experience, and what can be possible solutions to address them. So I'm gonna quickly share the screen so you can see my presentation. One moment. There we go. Can you confirm if everyone can see the screen correctly?
We can see the screen.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Perfect. So diving into our presentation. So when we carried out this research, we started with a very broad overview of the current landscape in the EU, and this was mainly done through existing literature. And then the research was also carried out through a stakeholder study, a more comprehensive stakeholder study, through a survey and 3 in-depth interviews. So what you see here on this slide is mainly taken from existing literature on textiles. So some of these things might be familiar with you, but I thought I would just present it so that we all are on the same page when it comes to the current situation. And the current situation is a little bit of a mixed picture. On the one hand, we see that the current textile market in the EU presents very vibrant communities of reuse business models. So we have a wide network. For example, I'm speaking from the reuse perspective. So we have a wide network of social enterprises that have experience in handling textile waste and textile use products, repairing them, reusing them, or recycling them. And we see also their job potential is really significant. We have an estimate of 20 to 35 jobs created by a social enterprise every 1,000 tons collected, with a view of being reused. We also have 50 to 60% of textiles that are collected in the EU that are still in condition to be reused. So there is potential for example, second-hand business models or repair business models in the EU, and we already see it existing right now. We also see that the collected textile waste actually does end up being reused in a broad percentage. However, then the other side of the coin is a more negative situation, and this is what we're experiencing right now with the textile market that is increasingly oversaturated by overproduction trends. So by increasing volumes of textile products that are put on the market, we also see the quality of these textile products that are put on the market is decreasing, has been decreasing in recent years. And this translates in a result that you can see here on this slide, that the reusable clothing in textile waste, so in the textile waste that is collected, has been decreasing throughout the last 10 years. This, of course, poses barriers to business models that want to, or whose main activity is to try to reuse collected textiles, try to even recycle collected textiles, because as you can see here, we have 20 to 30% of separately collected textiles that are being recycled. However, this recycling at present is mostly downcycling activities, whereas 1% of around 1% of separately collected textiles is recycled fiber to fiber. And then to this, we also add the consumer dimension, where studies demonstrate that 20%, around 20%, this of course varies when you consider different EU countries, 20% of consumers regularly buys used clothes. So there is definitely some work to do on engaging consumers on this side. But what I'm gonna present next is a result from our stakeholder study. So when we actually went to talk with different stakeholders to identify the main challenges that these circular business models in textile face in the EU. And when we analyzed all the findings, we found that the situation, the current landscape, presents two paradoxes. The first paradox is really apparent, is really evident, and is that circular business models kind of need to address the problems that are coming from our linear economy, so coming from overproduction, coming from increasing volumes of waste, because they are the ones handling this waste most often. But at the same time, they have to compete with these linear business models on the same linear textile market. This is an example of what you could call unfair competition in a way, because as we all know, the cost of new textiles that are put on the EU market doesn't really internalize all the externalities of production, and this poses real challenges to the competitiveness of circular business models. The second paradox is becoming more and more evident now, especially in 2025, as we now have started to have mandatory separate collection of textile waste throughout the EU. And is that the flows of textile waste are increasing. They're already huge and are increasing, but then the suitability of these collected textiles for reuse and the feedstock available for recycling are still limited. This is, of course, due to lowering quality of textiles and decreasing durability of textiles, but also mixed blends that hinder correct recycling and make recycling more challenging. So all of this translates in a situation where circular business models are or face hurdles in when it comes to financial viability, mainly due to their high upfront costs and also higher labor costs, since most activities take place in Europe. As I mentioned before, unfair competition by traditional or very linear business models that have been operating on the EU market for a long time, and also insufficient funding mechanisms. Something I mentioned briefly before is that starting in 2025, we now have mandatory separate collection of textile waste in the EU. However, we still don't have, as of this moment, we don't have operational EPR schemes for textiles in all EU countries. We only have a handful of them, and even in those countries where EPR is operational for textiles, often the fees do not really reflect the full costs of all circular activities that have to take place when textiles are collected, with the view of being reused or recycled. And then, of course, what all of this then translates into is a current lack of infrastructure or insufficient infrastructure to deal with the increasing volumes that we see on the textile market, and a lack of waste policy implementation. What I mentioned briefly right now about EPR is an example, but there will be more on policy later on in my presentation. So then, after having talked about the challenges, let's try to lighten the mood a little bit. We also interviewed and surveyed multiple stakeholders. Oh, I apologize, I went too far. We also interviewed stakeholders and asked them what, in their opinion, and here I'm talking about actors all through the value chain of textiles, including circular business models. What are the main opportunities to support them and to help them scale up and compete on the market? And here, the main aspects, you see 4 categories here in this slide, but the main one was really policy. So policy support is still lacking, and there are a wide number of tools available for policymakers to really support circular activities for textiles. Of course, EPR comes top of the list, especially now that we do have EU legislation that mandates EPR for textiles. However, this EPR implementation at national level has to be done right. We have to have full cost coverage of activities, otherwise the fees will not be sufficient to cover all the costs that are necessary to deal with our waste volumes. We also need to, policymakers need to put in place economic incentives and also fiscal incentives for these business models. I'm thinking, for example, here about reduced VAT for reused goods and for example, for secondhand goods. When we talk about eco-design policies, these are also extremely crucial. We see that textiles is a priority for future eco-design requirements, and this is going to come in a couple years down the line, but it's really crucial to set ambitious requirements for circular design that keeps in mind repair and recycling. So when it comes to materials, when it comes to durability of textiles, when it comes to repairability of textiles. Another crucial aspect also, I mean, if we talk, we can talk about incentives, we can talk about design, but we also have to disrupt the current system of linear practices that again poses a sort of unfair, what you could call unfair competition to circular business models. And this can be done again in a number of ways. Some things that were mentioned by our stakeholders in the study were a ban on destruction of unsold goods. That is something that we see is coming at EU level, but also eco-modulating, so modulating the EPR fees that are paid by producers, by whoever puts textiles on the EU market, not only based on design features, design criteria, but also based on volumes that are placed on the market, so as to incentivize a reduction in volumes that are placed on the market in the first place. Last but definitely not least, on the policy side, we also see the importance of public procurement criteria for circular textiles and for circular textile services, both goods and services really. These are also really crucial to stimulate demand or to give a reliable public demand to these nascent circular business models that need support right now. Then when it comes to the other categories that you see here, of key opportunities. We see the technological side, the innovation side is also crucial right now. Automatic sorting technologies, we saw it mentioned by Julia as one of the CISUTAC pilots. It's not scaled up in Europe. It's not common practice to have automated sorting. There are also different needs when it comes to sorting, whether we sort for reuse with an eye for reuse or whether we sort for recycling. And there are different applications that can be done of automatic versus manual sorting. We also see many opportunities with providing digital services to engage consumers. So diversifying really the solutions that are offered by circular business models, not just, for example, in-store solutions, but also online solutions. Of course, many opportunities are given by the availability of product information. Product information, we all know it in this space, is crucial both for consumers, but also for circular actors more further down the value chain. When it comes to sorting, when it comes to also recycling, having accurate information is crucial. And also to answer to one of the questions that was posed during Julia's presentation, again, I'm coming back here on consumers, because consumer behavior is not something that comes out of nowhere. Of course, consumer behavior can be influenced and is influenced all the time. So far, it has been influenced by majorly linear economy and linear actors, but we do have tools at our disposal to influence consumer behaviors. I'm thinking information campaign that were mentioned, for example, to be funded through EPR schemes in the future, but also incentives, direct incentives for consumers, such as repair bonuses, reuse vouchers, and reuse bonuses, as is already the case in a couple of EU countries. But this practice could be really scaled up throughout the EU, especially with the rollout of EPR schemes. Then all of this was condensed in our research findings and in our discussion to boil down some policy recommendations. This is, of course, not a comprehensive overview of what we have in the report. I invite you all to check it out if you're interested in finding out more. But these are some of the recommendations that we were able to generate with our partners and as a result of this research. Of course, the big elephant in the room is always overproduction, and ultra and fast fashion remain the biggest threat, or one of the biggest threats to circular business models in the EU. We have a desperate need to tackle overproduction in the EU. EPR can be a tool to do that, as I mentioned before, but it has to be ensured that it follows, that is aligned, that EPR schemes are aligned with the waste hierarchy, so prioritize the higher stages of the waste hierarchy, and also making sure that eco-modulation of EPR fees is strong enough to actually have a steering effect on production practices. We also saw mentioned time and time again by our interviewed stakeholders that EU funding should be directed towards circular models, towards developing solutions that are scalable. CISUTAC is an example of this, but there are many other projects that are doing similar work in many other areas. This is really necessary to enhance sorting capacities, which at present are not sufficient to deal with the current volumes, and also to invest way more than it is done now in developing recycling solutions. Speaking of public money, since we're talking about public money, we also wanted to mention that national and local authorities can and should lead by example through public procurement, so stimulating public demand for not only goods, reused and recycled textile goods, for example, but also circular services. It's something really important to give, again, a reliable source of public demand for these models. And last but not least, something I briefly mentioned earlier, but it's also really crucial, especially when you talk to specific circular actors that perhaps sell secondhand goods and try to be, of course, competitive, try to offer an affordable alternative to linear products. One solution here is to reduce or eliminate VAT, so give fiscal reduction on repair services, but also reuse products to make these options more viable and more affordable. Of course, again, this was not an exhaustive overview of what we have, but I hope I was able to give you at least an overview of our findings, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simone. There is now time for some questions indeed. There was one comment for future webinars, so I will leave that one and we'll, of course, take that with us. The question is from Pauline. Do you have a view on how the textile labeling regulation and the waste shipment regulation hinder or enable CBM? Do you have an answer on that?
I can try. Yeah. On textile labeling, yeah, indeed, it's something I forgot to mention earlier when I was talking about product information. And even within, I can tell you within the RREUSE network, many of our members that are doing work on the ground see the impact of textile labeling on their work. We see right now that a lot of labels are cut simply by consumers before, during the use phase, and then these garments are discarded and have to be dealt with in some way, but information is missing, or simply the label just fades out. So with the current revision of the textile labeling regulation, there are definitely opportunities to improve the situation, well, either try to prevent these cases of missing information, try to also make information more reliable and more complete, because in some cases it's there have been cases of simply inaccurate information also on labels, which is then again relevant not only for consumers at the purchase stage, but also for circular business models in sorting, starting from sorting, then reuse and recycling. There are also debates on whether to include digital options or digital components to textile labeling, which has not been done or was not included in the previous version of the textile labeling regulation. It is a hot topic for this current revision. It has to be mentioned that most, again, here I'm speaking from a RREUSE perspective, most operations for example, in sorting for reuse are done manually, and there should still be a lot of attention put on the physical label, because the physical label is still a crucial piece of information. But of course, digital components can give further, more detailed information that is perhaps relevant, that could be very relevant, for example, for correct recycling or others. And it is still to be seen how this will interact with the digital product passport for products as well, because the DPP has some elements that could, either overlap or complement textile labeling. So this is yet to be seen, but I definitely see opportunities there. For waste shipment, I'm not an expert on waste shipment, so I will be honest and tell you that I don't know the topic enough to give you an answer. I prefer telling you that I don't know rather than trying to improvise an answer. So I will, if there are other people that can contribute on this in the room, I'm also happy to hear an answer, but otherwise I'm not sure.
Thank you, Simone. There are some other questions, also some comments. Like Astrid says, incentives at circular business initiatives to your loyalty programs. Another comment is, problem is not overproduction, but overconsumption. And then I think we have another question, also from Astrid. She says, a lot of the recommendations are on a macro level policy. Did some of the interviews address what we as business drivers can do while we simultaneously push on the policy agenda? Can you answer that question? It's also in the chat if you want to read it.
Yeah. And I was just reading it in the chat to make sure
I see it.
I got the whole message. Yeah, indeed. A lot of the focus of my presentation in this case was on policy, because that was repeatedly highlighted by all the stakeholders we surveyed and we interviewed. So I decided to focus on that. But indeed, there are other solutions, there are other strategies that were identified. One that comes to mind, since you talked, I assume you're speaking from a business perspective. So from a business perspective, it comes without saying that collaboration was highlighted as a key driver. Of course, just saying the word collaboration is not enough by itself, but some examples that were highlighted was to have, for example, to try to build synergies between business models that are at different stages of value chain. So this is something we already see with repair and reuse, for example. So repair centers collaborating with whether it's sorters or secondhand stores, but also further down the value chain, recyclers. I mean, recyclers need someone, right, buying the materials that they are able to have and to sell. So having, for example, longer purchasing agreements with then manufacturers that are able to use that material is crucial. And at the same time, sorters need recyclers to get, to take the non-reusable portions of collected textiles. So these connections through the value chain are crucial. But again, if I think about, the value chain as a whole, a lot of these connections should be facilitated because at present they are, there are not enough of them. They should be facilitated through policy as well. So, when we talk about policy, it's all about creating the environment in which the value chain operates. So if changing policies can help then facilitate these connections. That, at least that's my take from our research, from our findings.
Thank you, Simone. I hope that answered your question, Astrid. Then we have another question. Could you please share an example of green public procurement for the workwear of professional uniforms based on circularity criteria? And which country is advanced in this field? And thank you, Inga, for this question.
Yeah, thank you indeed for the question. I'm not sure I have an answer now, but we do have examples from our network. I'm thinking how I can provide you with an answer, not right now, but I will just type my email in the chat later, and we can get in touch, because we do have some examples from our network on this. But yeah, just not right now.
Thanks. Then another question from Shoko Shiba. He or she says, do you think that by these policy approaches there would be less ultra-fast fashion products put in the European Union market, or would we need to implement rules continuously to fill the loopholes? And how do you see the future? Interesting question.
Wow, the second question is a really big question. How do I see the future? But I can try to answer the first one. I do think that some of the measures that were proposed, that I presented, could help in fighting ultra fast fashion. Of course, we also need to address how these and why these products, especially when they're non-compliant with EU rules, end up on the EU market. And that's an issue also of market surveillance. So that's not something I mentioned in the presentation, but it is really important to fight this these increasing volumes of products that are put on the market. Again, some of the things, like to answer your question, yes, I do think some of the measures I presented would definitely help, including eco-design as well, because eco-design is all about cutting off the worst performers when it comes to design of products. It's about setting minimum requirements on a variety of aspects, of course. So that would also help. Unfortunately, eco-design for textiles, it's not something that we will see next year. It's coming more down the line, but I do think it would help. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And I see another question just coming in. It's from Mariangela, and the question is, how many and what type of stakeholders did you interview?
So for the type of stakeholders, there was essentially all across the value chain. So starting with retail sorting, collection sorting, reuse and repair, recycling, but also research and innovation, research and development. So whether it was institutes or academia, we really had a wide variety of stakeholders. The 3 in-depth interviews we conducted were specifically aimed at 3 types of circular business models, because we wanted to develop case studies as well. And this is all something you can find in the report. So it was really aimed at the three stages of touching upon collection and sorting, repair, recycling stages. I don't right now. I don't recall the exact number, but I mean it's in the report. It's let me just I can post the link to the report in the chat, so
yeah,
it's easier.
That would be great. Thanks. Other questions? We have a few more minutes. Yeah. Oh, it's more comments. Not a question. Yeah, in that case, then I will. Thank you very much for joining us today. And we hope this session has given you valuable insights into the evolving landscape of circular business models in textiles, from market trends to barriers and enablers. And of course, a special thanks to Julia from STAM and Simone from RREUSE for sharing their expertise and experiences. And I think your contributions help strengthen the understanding needed to advance circularity across the textile sector. We encourage you to stay connected with the work of the CISUTAC project, continue the conversation within your organizations, networks, and communities. And looking ahead, the next 3 webinars will be scheduled in 2026. And together with Emma from RREUSE, we start with the topic of Open Data Guide, and we'll keep you updated about the exact dates. And as a reminder, the webinar recording and presentation slides will be shared with all registered participants. And in case you have additional questions or feedback, feel free to reach out to the organizing team. And you can also stay updated on upcoming sessions in our CISUTAC Sustainability Forum. On behalf of RREUSE, STAM, and Wageningen University and Research, thank you again for your time and participation. And we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Have a great day.